it comes back to two things that America cannot deal with and struggles to talk about all together at the same time, and that's race and sex, right? Because the
Interesting.
implication of somebody being mixed race is that it, not even implication, right? I mean, it is living proof that people of different backgrounds interacted sexually, right? Had a child together, and so I think that's why there's the obsession with it. I think that's why there is this sick fixation. And in the case of Donald Trump and his ramblings about Kamala Harris, I'm not sure that he still has the cognitive abilities to really parse out his strategy there. I think he just knows that at a base level, down in his amygdala, down in his brainstem, down in whatever reptilian remnants of his brain are still functioning at this point in his decrepit life, he knows that it will get the reaction he's looking for, and that is his one form of intelligence, is how to cause a reaction in the crowd.
All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Gordon, and this is Good Guys Getting Better. And to my right,
And I'm Christian Hanley here with the flu. Good times.
all right, gentlemen, it's been a couple of weeks, and there is always a rapid news cycle that covers a variety of different things. But for today, I know we want to take, and I want to take a slightly different approach to how we're going to tackle some of the news, right? So I think the headlines have been beat into oblivion. They aren't novel. We're not a news agency, but we are a couple of guys that are dealing with these things in the way that so many other people are. So, my first question for discussion this evening are the effects of racist speech, right? And although I am not a news anchor and this is not a newscast, I do feel it's editorially responsible to call these things what they are. So, the past couple of weeks, there have been statements by JD Vance, repeated by Donald Trump, and then there have been the star for 10 days, Laura Loomer, talking specifically and using specifically, sometimes specifically targeted language and sometimes thinly veiled language. The first and maybe the most prominent, which will be etched in the annals of American political history forever, is Donald Trump repeating a claim that we would later find out that was more or less fabricated by his running mate JD Vance, that uh, there are people in Springfield, Ohio, eating the animals of their neighbors, and these folks are immigrants and they're Haitian. The other big standout, I think, in the last couple of weeks, and there's always so many, Laura Loomer makes a claim that if Kamala Harris is elected as the president, then the White House is going to smell like curry. So, gentlemen, my question to you, from your perspective, what is the effect of racist speech in our body politics, on our children, in our relationships, and how we view the world? Aleem, I'll start with you.
Well, gosh, I guess there's a lot of there's a lot of historical context, in my opinion, in that I think the effect of it, to answer your question outright, is that it's adding to the desensitization of the American public to insensitivity, right? In insensitive speech, insensitive language, and thought processes. I don't think that, frankly, people are as outraged as they should be, or as they once would have been, let's
Right.
say 25 years ago. And so for me, my outrage hasn't changed, which is why maybe ironically, I'm less sensitive to what the non-response has been today, or in the recent past couple of weeks, to the racist speech, because I'm so used to people underreacting to this now the last 8 or 10 years. So the problem is that we've begun to allow this to happen, and the needs, or the respect needing to be given to oppressed or historically oppressed peoples, is just it's absent now. We're not following through as we once did. No, again, I don't want to belabor my point and go into what I feel is some of the historical context or reasoning as to how we wound up here. But my concern is still the same: is that it is harmful uh, when we begin to look at the others uh, and not give them the respect and the right to be treated with respect, right? To say we're not going to denigrate who you are and where you come from, and your experience, and minimize the importance of showing you that respect. We're not, we're no longer doing that, and that's I guess my biggest concern with what we've been seeing over the last couple of weeks.
I mean,
So
no, sorry, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Christian.
No, I mean, but it's like we've kind of gone full circle, right? Because this is not anything new. In fact, it's really, really old, right? This is like old school racism. People from a different place eat weird food. They're going to come in, into your neighborhood and ruin your way of life. I mean, it's really, really old. But we've gone full circle, I say, because we've gone from this sort of racism before to decades, generations of dog whistle politics, right? Where you would have insinuations that people from different places, people of different backgrounds are bad. They're the other. But you wouldn't have politicians say it outright, right? There was always that tongue in cheek, that nod, that wink for the right people in the audience, the racist, usually white American conservative voters to pick up on that signal. And with the age of Donald Trump, that's all been thrown out the window. I realize in this case, it's more JD Vance who's been doing this. But that's all gone now. Now we're just going full circle all the way back to, these people who came here, they shouldn't be here, they're ruining things. And, when you look at it, the Midwest right now, it's going through this giant change in the economy. It's been called the Rust Belt for years because of the deindustrialization. Now these cities are trying to build themselves back up in a new economy. And the Republican governor of Ohio has said as much, DeWine. He has gone on TV. He's written an op-ed asking for the Trump campaign to stop with this because it is hurting people. The last time I checked, the number of bomb threats called in to schools and other facilities around Springfield, Ohio, was at 30. Right. So kids are missing school. People are living in fear, all because they are ginning up this racist, xenophobic fervor among a national audience of Trumpists and MAGA supporters. And the effect on the town is palpable. You have kids missing school, people living in fear. It's not just a hypothetical. This is a real dangerous scenario, and it's brought about by Trump and Vance. And I'll just say it, they're lies. This is not, spin. This is lying.
Well, again, we have the creative luxury to call it as it is. I mean, I think many American people, at a minimum, recognize that there's stretching of truth. It is helpful that JD Vance said as much. So to dig a little bit more into the effects, why do you think that people are mobilizing to action? So you said up to 30 bomb threats. What is it about this speech that is triggering people? What is concerning is schools, so why bomb threats to schools? And I recognize no one on this panel is a sociologist or a psychologist, but just as a thought exercise, what is it that's triggering people to want to send bomb threats to schools? Well, I'll start with Christian. What is your thought?
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, what's the scariest thing in the world? If you're an adult, if you're a parent, right? If somebody called in a threat to whatever, to a concert venue, that would cause enough panic as it is. But in a country that already has, I hate to say it, but it's the truth, mass shootings at schools, baked into the cake, part of public life for 25 solid years now. And with every parent worried about that every day we send our kids off to school, what could be scarier, right? And if you ask, why is this speech in particular causing these people, these awful people, to lodge these kind of threats? I mean, it isn't just this one speech. This is just that final straw after hundreds and thousands of speeches and tweets and Truth Social posts and all this other stuff that has people in a genuine frenzy. These are people who, forget not hearing this pod or anything else, they don't even see mainstream journalism. They don't read a mainstream newspaper. None of that, right? They are getting everything from either directly from the Trump campaign or through social media. And their view on what's reality has been completely warped. They think that this is genuine and real. And so, yeah, they think that they are being invaded, that they're under attack, and that they're doing something courageous, I guess. I don't know. Obviously, it's not most of the MAGAverse making threats like this, right? We're talking about 30 some odd threats in a country of, hundreds of millions, 30 million people. But all the same, these are people who are living in an alternate reality that's been completely contrived and served to them through digital platforms.
Christian, let me follow up on that, Gleam, before you respond. Why is racist speech so effective at triggering people? I mean, I know I kind of answered that, but it seems to me like this is the tactic du jour.
Yeah.
What is it about racist speech that gets people so mobilized to act?
I mean, I don't know if we have this much time, but there's several different reasons, right? There's the nation's history of racism and division along lines of race, and what Trump is doing, and Vance for that matter, is tried and tested. It's the classic attack line of any demagogue, right? It's to find the fault lines in a population and drive a wedge through them so that you can turn the people against one another and come in and take power, right? So if you were to do this in other parts of the world, it might be religion. It might be social class. It might be something else, right? Usually religion, but in other scenarios too. But in the U.S., it's going to be race, right? Because of the nation's history. And so they know what they're doing. This is nothing novel. They're not being creative. Like I said, that we've come full circle again, right? They've seen this has gone on in campaigns throughout American history, and they've thrown away the dog whistle for the bullhorn, and they're getting what they want. They're getting headlines. They're sowing chaos. And so, yeah, I mean, we obviously can't go into all the sociological and historical factors, but I think that's really what it is. It's they recognize the fault lines in our society and they're playing upon them.
So this is where I take some prerogative as a host. Christian, I have to say, you got some bars. My man said they've traded in the dog whistle for a megaphone.
I don't think I was the
he
first
said it
one to
without
coin
breaking.
that, but
it doesn't matter. It's the first time I've heard it, and it sounded like fire.
Well,
I gotta
virus riddled brain is doing its best right now, so I appreciate that, John. Thank you.
For our listeners, people that are listening to the podcast that can't see it, Christian obviously has the flu. His face is completely pale, but his nose is as red as the leave button on this recording software. It is immaculate. It is Rudolph-esque.
Yeah.
And he still has bars, and apparently his middle finger works too.
Has no bearing on my hands, right?
There you go. Aleem, why is racist speech so? Why is it the political tool du jour, in your opinion? I mean, surely there are other ways to, if creating, as Christian said, discord and chaos, there have to be other ways to do it. Or, God, this is a revolutionary idea. Are there positive ways to make your case without sowing discord and chaos to make your point?
What's the fastest, most direct way to stir up an underclass or impoverished, group of people is to tell them that their struggle is going to get harder, or they're going to be replaced by someone. So that is always, as Christian pointed out, that's always been the struggle in this country since its inception, was that since we're so diverse and so many people are coming from so many different places, that somebody's going to lose their spot and somebody's struggle is going to get harder. And we can't let that happen. We have the power in numbers, so we're not going to let that happen. And we fought wars over that concept. And so I think, that touching on race, touching on again, blaming the others for your challenges, which unfortunately over the last couple of decade and a half or so, the country has been convinced on both sides of the aisle. Many people have been convinced that immigration is such a threat to our way of life. In multiple classes of people, amongst multiple races of people, that immigration, and it's just, they just add the illegal part on there because that's easy to attack. But immigration in general is a problem because somebody's going to get replaced. somebody's struggle is going to get harder because of it. That's the false narrative that has been invested in by the right for quite a while now, and it's really taken hold. So you have so many people saying, "Hey, you're right." Anytime they can point the finger at those immigrants who did something wrong, or they're illegal and they're breaking the law, and look what they're doing now. They're eating household pets. They took my job. The job that I didn't want, and they're all kinds of craziness. So before it was immigration, or it was all immigration is just another, I would call it a subsect of, like, to your point, I guess, of racism, right? It's if this, you look back in the history of the country and the different I guess flows of people from different countries into this country, they've varied over time, and they all got something. They all, they all, this country gave a little bit to everybody, and they came in here, and they found a way to have an issue with them. Obviously, African Americans, we got it from the onset because we didn't even come here by our own design, but at the same time, because we were here, and if we had our freedom now, we can take something from someone else. So that's the notion. So that since we got control of their freedom, let's not give it to them. But they couldn't control that for everybody coming in. So they just got fights, and they got riots and things against them, trying to get rid of those folks because they already had their freedom. But it's like, okay, we got to find another way to oppress them. We've got these African Americans already oppressed. We just got to make sure they stay that way. So it's this that dynamic that is, like I said, it's a fabric of this country.
But I do want to say one thing here, and that is that obviously these are real people we're talking about here. This is not a hypothetical. And what JD Vance and the Trump campaign have been doing is they're playing their own base for fools, right? They are using this tactic it's not, the primary purpose is not to harm immigrants or migrants or anybody else, right? Although that is the collateral damage, and they do not care one bit about the damage they cause, including violence or threats of violence. But the people who they're playing for fools are their own supporters. They are genuinely believing that they can tell people who they believe will vote for them that, these people are coming to get you. They're gonna come and ruin your town, ruin your life, take your job, whatever. If you vote for us, we will save you. Right? None of it's true. It is by Vance's own admission on CNN, talking to Dana Bash. I mean, he admits that he made up the story, but that's really the play. They simultaneously disrespect the intelligence of their own supporters and the people they hope will vote for them, while at the same time throwing under the bus the lives and safety of innocent victims who have nothing to do with their campaign or their foolishness.
There's an interesting pattern, and I do want to segue to our next topic. But there was recent a truth, I guess, is what Donald Trump's platform calls their internet.
There's some other podcasters at the Bulwark who like to call it a bleat, like a sheep, a bleat. I think we should adopt that.
I will happily adopt that. So moved. So his bleat, I think it was in the last 24 hours, where he basically attempted to go on the offense as it pertains to women's rights and reproductive rights, and says something to the effect that women are focused too much on abortion and reproductive issues, and they should be focused on how unhappy and how sad and how depressed, and that everyone wanted to have reproductive rights back to the states, and that's actually a great thing for women. And he will be the best president for women because he will make them happy again, notwithstanding a lack of control over their bodies.
And he will protect them. He will be their
protector. And he will protect them. So the issue, and I think it's a fascinating, kind of a fascinating strategy in literally, and we will talk about misappropriation later, but basically misappropriating a legitimate tactic and replacing it with absolute garbage and nonsense. I think you see the same exact thing as it pertains to race. He's the best president for black people ever, even more so than Abraham Lincoln. I'm fairly certain he has no idea what Abraham Lincoln did.
Yeah,
he has no idea why the Civil War was fought. All he knows is that he is losing with a particular framing, so he's just going to adopt the framing as his own. So let me use that as a segue to talk about the challenges of understanding biracial identity in the U.S. So another tactic that he has used, and really the only one it seems that he has on Kamala Harris, is that she was black and then she was Indian, or she was Indian and then she was black, as if no one in this country can have more than one racial identity or makeup, as if whiteness is a monolith. Like every white person springs from the same white place, which obviously doesn't make sense. And it's interesting because it doesn't look like he knows where to land the attack. Is it Indian? Is it black? Why? And we've had a long and very recorded history of struggling with biracial identity. So much so that it was illegal to have biracial It was, different than South Africa, but very similar. It would, like Trevor Noah famously said in his book, he was a crime. He was a living crime. Is there a connection between the effects of racist speech and struggling to understand biracial identity in this country? Christian, I know that you have perhaps a really informed perspective on this.
Wow.
But
really? Really?
I do. Maybe I'm going to get another middle finger, but what
on the pod? Like unprovoked.
Say,
I'm just sitting here, man with the flu, and you're just gonna go right into okay.
Let's just say he might have been considered a criminal in certain places.
But why do we struggle? Why is it a big deal? It was a big deal with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
It's a big deal with Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big deal walking down the street. Why is this such an issue? And why is this something that may or may not resonate with voters?
Well, I mean, the fact that JD Vance and Donald Trump don't get it or can't at least shut up about it speaks volumes. JD Vance, and this is not me bringing it up, he's made this very publicly. He's running for office. His wife isn't white. She's Indian American. They have 3 mixed kids. And he's an absolute coward. When the basement dwelling gaming bros came after his wife for not being white, his defense was, yeah, she's not white, but I love her anyway. Absolute coward. Makes Ted Cruz seem like the most chivalrous man alive. But the short answer, and I'm going for brevity as much as I can tonight, given my state, is it comes back to 2 things that America cannot deal with and struggles to talk about all together at the same time, and that's race and sex, right? Because the implication of somebody being mixed race is that not even implication, right? I mean, it is living proof that people of different backgrounds interacted sexually, right? Had a child together. And so I think that's why there's the obsession with it. I think that's why there is this sick fixation. And in the case of Donald Trump and his ramblings about Kamala Harris, I'm not sure that he still has the cognitive abilities to really parse out his strategy there. I think he just knows that at a base level, down in his amygdala, down in his brainstem, down in whatever reptilian remnants of his brain are still functioning at this point in his decrepit life, he knows that it will get the reaction he's looking for, and that is his one form of intelligence, is how to cause a reaction in a crowd.
Aleem, why? And I like this as a topic because the blanket assumption that we make is that biracial is black and white, right? And I think it's interesting that when Kamala Harris makes the distinction, or the way that people are framing it, they're talking about her Jamaican and Indian ancestry and not her black and white. And at some point, she chose to identify, and this is where it gets tricky because I can't speak for her, but the assumption is that she's chosen to be black. She went to an HBCU. She pledged the Divine Nine sorority. She's an AKA. She has an affinity for the culture. Why is it a big deal? And for what it's worth, her husband is white. Like there's a mixed bag. I tend to think it's representative of the reality of America, right? So, why is it a big deal when it might be closer to the reality of America than it isn't? This isn't the 50s again, where interracial relationships in parts of the country were illegal.
So you're asking, what, why is this the case? Why?
Why is this such a challenge? Why is this something that we keep
Well,
just having to deal with and don't seem to have a clear answer?
well,
Like why is it, for example, that on one hand it's social cachet for some folks to say like, look, what makes me up is more than just a monolith. And for other people, it's like, well, we need the monolith to verify your purity and your acceptability.
I think I mean it's the harsh reality of the undercurrent of racism that's still pervasive in our American society. I mean, there's no to your point, there's no reason why somebody should have any concern or issue with biraciality. Like it's not a thing. Like that's just okay. That person decided to be with a person who looks different than them, who has different skin color than them. There's no real good reason that should be a concern for anyone at any time for any reason. But it is in this country specifically because this country has a very much racist past and current and present. So the reality is that people they have formed opinions of people based on their race. They do it. We do it constantly, based on the race and other things. But the reality is that you know to Tim Walls's point, right? We don't mind our own doggone business. Like we just don't. Like
at the end of the day, problem. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
That's really the bottom line.
Yeah.
It's like that's really who I decide to be with or have children with is 100% not my issue, not my concern, not something I should have a public opinion, right? I can have whatever opinion I have in my own head or mind or within my own family or home or whatever, but it should never leave that, and I shouldn't be discussing the viability, the acceptability, the reasonability of that relationship. What we do, because we're Americans. And from the inception of this country, that was an acceptable thing to do.
Right, but I mean, that. I think that to your point about Tim Walls' now famous tagline, I think that those are two currents that have run parallel in American society from the beginning. There's one school of thought that is mind your own damn business, and then another which is the nosy neighbor, right? And you see in that latter example, people, and this is why I said to answer John's earlier question, it's both about race and sex, because there are and have always been people in this country who have been completely preoccupied with the sex lives of others in a way that does not exist in all other cultures and societies. Maybe in some. I've not been to every country in the world, obviously, but in some ways, the way it's politicized, I think, is uniquely American, at least within the Western world. And you see that with mixed couples, mixed on the basis of race, mixed on the basis of nationality, national origin, religion even, or same-sex couples, right? Where there is still a lot of Americans who want to basically not mind their own damn business, right? There's that preoccupation. And I don't think that those two thought lines, those two ways of thinking, either one of them is going to go away anytime soon. I'm just hopeful that the Tim Walls ideology of minding your own damn business, I hope that is the majority and that prevails. Because at the end of the day, it is no one's damn business. And to John's earlier point, this is not the 1950s. I mean, just to give you an example, I one time had a really, really frank conversation with my late grandmother, my Nana, and in her generation, they were Irish Catholic, and people married, people who were from literally the same religion, same national origin, same everything down the line, right? Like my grandparents, their respective families were from one county over from one another in Western Ireland, right? And then, of course, from that generation down, it got more and more mixed as the family got more and more integrated into American life. but she would tell me about how in her day, to be um, Irish Catholic but marry into a family that was also Catholic but a different European national origin was like a scandal, you know? And to me, that was like, wait, but you're like, who cares? Like it made no sense. But then you flash forward a few more decades, and then we're getting to a place now where not for everybody, but for a lot of Americans, fortunately, more and more, that same laughing reaction I had to that is now, I think that, certainly our kids' generation would think that that'd be crazy if you're talking about Americans not wanting people to marry someone of a different skin tone or different whatever. So there is that progress, and I hope that Tim Walls's side prevails, obviously. But I do still think that the reason why this is even a point to be discussed right now is because of the existence of that other current in American society that refuses to mind their own damn business.
I wonder if mind your own damn business is the best way to approach this.
Oh, I think it is.
I think that there is an element of mind your own damn business. However, what I'm interested in is what is it that makes that irrelevant, right? Like, what is it that we share that makes it irrelevant? Like, it's the phrase, we have far more in common than we have apart.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a cliche, but I believe it's true. So I'm very interested in what's in common. And my wife and I have been together for almost 19 years. Prior to that, you pick the color on the rainbow. Like, I've dated it all. Like, it wasn't really.
Congratulations, John. Let's all give John a golf clap here for his prowess.
Well,
well done, sir.
That was intended to be a flex.
Sure. Okay.
That was intended to be a flex.
I didn't bring it up. You did. I'm just saying.
Pardon me?
So you have the United Nations of girlfriends. So.
Yes, and the countries that were applying for membership. All right, anyway. I hope my wife does listen to this pod. All right, anyway.
Oh my God.
But anyway, there is room in America. I think that's one of the beautiful things about this country. Like, there is room. Like, it's designed, as rigid as some people like to apply it, there's room for other. I mean, you just read the amendments. Like, you can speak freely, you can worship freely, you can assemble freely. All right, like, you can't be denied other things. Like, you can pick who it is that you want to live with and to love and to marry. Like, there's more than room, and we protect this. So, having this fixation on and biracial, in and of that's even a closed universe. Like, there is far more genetically that makes this up than just two genetic strains. Right, like, this is also the 23andMe generation. Everybody can look up and see where they came from. And Christian, you and I have talked a lot about this offline. I think a lot of people will be surprised at the genetic diversity that's in their chromosomes.
Mm-hmm.
Because that purity that you think that you are walking with is, in fact, a genetic lie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember the stat off the top of my head. But I've read before that Genghis Khan, for example, like, there are genetic markers for Genghis Khan that are literally,
I've heard that
like,
one. Yeah,
all over the world.
Patton Oswalt has a joke about that in his stand-up. Yeah, I've heard that one.
Let me use that as a transition point. We talk a lot about Donald Trump.
I don't know what you're talking about transition points, man. We've gone from your dating life, how much room there is in your bed. I mean, sorry, in America, Genghis Khan's proclivities, but yeah, let's pivot right now. Let's do it.
But look, this is what I'm doing as a host. I'm a master. I weave it all together.
Yeah, you do the weave. What is that? What he called it? The weave.
Smooth as sand.
All the English people that I know say that it is masterful, and I'm a genius when I do it. Okay.
I can't wait to go back and listen to this pod when I'm like fully healthy and lucid. It's gonna be amazing.
But so, guys, let's paint an affirmative picture of a post-Trump America, right? Like, there's still a lot of work to be done. There are positive signs that there would be a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz White House. And at some point, Donald Trump will be out of political life. Could be in a couple of months, could be in a couple of years. What is an affirmative picture of post-Trump? So it's not just kind of getting him away from the megaphone, but like, what are some things that are important as we move past this chapter in history? I think we've learned a lot about civics. We've learned a lot about ourselves and our relationship to the people around us. What are paint for me and for our listeners, what does America look like? What are some things that are things that we have to seize the moment and install so that we don't have an issue like this again? And I'm not saying, for what it's worth, for our listeners that are supporting Donald Trump, I am not saying
those aren't listeners. Those are just shit posters. They just leave comments on the shorts. They don't listen.
And by the way, I don't necessarily mind that. I welcome the shit posting. But I think, as you said earlier, so much of Donald Trump's strategy is taking advantage of people's inclination to believe what he's saying, because he's positioned himself as a businessman. He's been the president of the United States of America. He has all of the things that would tell you that this is a person you need to listen to, even if when you listen to him, the things that he says are always in conflict with one another. How do we, from a civic perspective, from a political perspective, from a finance perspective, what does a post-Trump America look like? Aleem, I'll start with you.
Sure. As you posed that question, I went through a few cycles in my mind. It was like, I wound up back in the cynical realm that I tend to reside in most often, in that I feel like the very fabric of this country has been severely damaged.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's an easy rebound from the last 10 years of politics. I feel like Donald Trump has exposed and energized an element in our country that enjoys ignorance, that hates fairness, that is fundamentally regressive in terms of rights, in terms of equality. It is we're all over the place, and there's so much confusion, right? There's an embrace of I mentioned the desire for people to be and maintain their ignorance, meaning people are so, at this point in our country, I think they're so accepting of letting someone else think for them that they trust, and then following whatever they say. People don't really want to do true research or even invest in following true researchers who have very scholarly approaches to examining culture and society. They don't want that. They just want this. It's very much the social media age coupled with the Trump foolishness age, and it puts it all together. And now you've got to find some way to excise all of that, right? And then get us back to where we love education, where we seek it out, where we want to know more, we want to understand each other, we want to be progressive, and not just 51% of the country. We want most of the country by far to be in that a mindset, versus where we've got like 30% of this country is really just I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of rebuilding that has to be done, and I'm not so sure how fast it could be done. I don't believe we're beyond rebuilding the country, obviously, but there's a lot that needs to be rebuilt.
I agree with you. I mean, I think
I'll yield my time.
I think one of the things that you brought up, and we've talked about on the pod before, part of this is the divestment from the public space.
Yeah.
And a part of that divestment is education. And education isn't just math and reading. It's critical thinking.
Civics.
Civics. I like what you also said about time. I think there's a temporal component. I don't think that this is an easy fix. I don't think this is a short-term fix. So, Christian, from your perspective, one, do you agree that this is not a short-term fix? And what kind of investments do we need to make to not just prevent this from a guardrails perspective, but from a true embrace of understanding right from wrong, understanding what's real and what's not. What do we need to do? Paint that affirmative picture. What does it look like from your perspective?
Well, so the final picture I am not in a position to paint yet, but I can certainly get into what lies between where we are now and that point. And to Aleem's point, it's not going to be a quick fix. I firmly believe that if Donald Trump were to disappear tomorrow, Trumpism wouldn't disappear with him, right? This has been the entire political party of the Republican Party has been completely gutted in terms of its infrastructure, its principles, its basic functioning, and now is a subsidiary of the Trump family. There's no bouncing back from that in a country that only has two political parties. You have dozens, if not hundreds of millions of people who have worldviews shaped not on any kind of cohesive ideology, but on memes and misinformation, mass disinformation. This is not going to be a quick fix. I think about some of the solutions. I've been researching and writing on this for over 2 years now, interviewing different experts on different aspects of this, on confirmation bias, on misinformation, on all different things, because there's a lot of talk about diagnosing the problem, but I'm really thinking a lot about how to dig into fixing it. And there's just one clip that I can't get out of my mind, where it's the writer Max Brooks talking about, kind of drawing the analogy between the end of this era and mid-century 1950s Germany, that we can hate the former leader and reject all that he stood for and leave that in the past. But the millions of people who went along, we can't move our society forward and cast half of them aside, right? We need to call them back in and find a way to reintegrate them back into normal life. And, you mentioned things like education. That's, yes, I firmly believe we have to have an education system across local and state lines that puts back into place things like critical thinking and reading and civics, American civics and government, all of that. But there's no quick fix to cultural issues. We can't legislate away cultural problems. What's going to have to happen is hundreds of millions of conversations had over and over again by people who are looking to reconnect with the former friends and neighbors and even family members who have gone down these rabbit holes, because scolding people is not going to work. Telling them to get educated is going to backfire. There's no one correct conversation to be had, and there's no one exchange that will accomplish that goal. But it's going to take millions of people exercising a great deal of tolerance to be able to have conversations with the people who have gone along with this for the past decade. And I don't expect anybody's going to be willing and ready to do that, a year from now. It might take a few more years. And in addition to that, thinking about things we can handle on a macro level, on even a legislative level, like, yes, regulating things like artificial intelligence, having one single regulation to start with for social media platforms who have done so much damage to the very idea of truth and to democracy in just the past 10, 20 years. Those things need to happen as well, especially as our technology continues to outstrip our morality at just a breathtaking pace. But to be certain, these things are going to take decades, not a few months or a few years.
If I might jump back in real quick, John,
Please.
is that I feel like, I was tempted to say the voices on the right side of history need to be louder, but that's not. I think voices on the right side of history need to be more effective and better prepared,
Right,
than they have been in the past. Right. I feel like far too many people who know the truth and who understand the truth are silent or unprepared to speak, and that's my biggest concern, that my biggest fear in all this is that Donald Trump gets elected. Biggest fear in this next few months that Donald Trump gets elected, and the trajectory of the economy, which is in a positive direction, continues in that direction, and then and I've mentioned this before, he gets credit for that. Well, that's harmful because if he does absolutely nothing, the economy will continue to improve at this point. Basically, and I'm sure it's far more complex than that. But the reality is that it's the same thing that happened the first time he got in the office, which is the only thing that his support is based on at this point. It's not based on his intellect. It's not based on the policies that he has. It's based on the fact that he was the guy in the chair when the economy was doing well. That's all. And people don't, the lack of knowledge and understanding of our economy and our civics and all these things are basically what's keeping him propped up, because they're assuming that he must have had something to do with that when he in fact did not. And that's so the point is that the voices who know the truth need to be louder. That's all I had to add.
Or not louder, you said, more effective.
Oh, I'm sorry, more effective and better prepared.
Yeah.
Not necessarily.
Christian, I have to say that was very well stated, and I think a very clear, start to the conversation, because there's a lot that needs to be reinvested, and there's a lot that really needs to be thought about, and I think there is a lot of noise and a lot of shouting. One of the things that you said was, which I love, is we need to reinvite people. Reinvite is almost underselling. What you really said is that engagement.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we aren't just casting half the country aside because they lost or we think that they're wrong.
Right.
Again, I'm talking a lot about South Africa, but there needs to be reconciliation. It needs to be truth and reconciliation.
Yeah.
Just because we disagree politically doesn't mean that we disagree about everything. And we don't have to. Christian, also, I want to give you credit. Months ago on this pod, you talked about using the I don't remember if it was the French or the British parliamentary elections, where there was basically a coalition of people that said, we all are united on this one thing. Let's get together and then figure out the rest later.
Oh, in France. Yeah.
In France, correct. Yeah. It looks like that's what's happening in this country. Every day there is a new swath of Republican leadership, high-profile Republicans that have made a decision that they're going to back Kamala Harris. Christian, do you think that is an opportunity for reconciliation? So rather than having someone that is a Democrat or on the left invite someone who was a Donald Trump supporter to a conversation, is it people that have been in politics and long enough and or have a clear-eyed vision of America that understand the threat? Is it more impactful for them to say, we've thought about this, let's talk about this together? We can go back to being, a Republican Party tomorrow, but for right now, for this to exist, we need this. Do you think that is a potent formula to engage people in the conversations you were talking about?
No.
Interesting.
I think it's two different things. What establishment Republicans are doing by backing Harris right now is sending a signal and giving a permission structure to undecided voters who are, maybe they used to be Republican, or maybe they're independents but lean conservative, or really we're talking about that slice of the electorate, right? A couple percentage points of people, but critical voters in certain states who will really decide the outcome of the election, right? When you've got 49-ish% here and 40 something over here who are already locked in. I mean, it's going to be decided on those tight margins. That's what that is for, and that's to get us through the next 2 months, right? The next 6 or so, 7 weeks. What I'm talking about, though, longer term, yes, could those leaders and former leaders have a role to play in that longer term conversation? Certainly. But what they're doing right now is going to have no impact on the people who are all in for Trump, or maybe not all in for Trump, but they are going with him, all the evidence notwithstanding, right? Because they've already completely thrown up their hands. Even the ones who are not all into the whole Trump MAGA red hat wearing, the ones who are still going to vote for him because, hey, at least he's not part of the establishment, the ones who have already completely lost faith in our institutions, in free media, in objective truth, in facts, in the political process, they will have already written off these people as part of that same establishment that they think failed them the past several decades, right? So the conversations I'm talking about are going to be millions, hundreds of millions in living rooms and at dining room tables and at Thanksgiving for years to come. And again, could those people serve a purpose in helping to facilitate those? Definitely. But this is not the kind of thing that's going to come from the top down. It's going to be a very slow and very gradual social movement that's going to have to happen.
That's well said. All right, gentlemen, I want to end with a bit of levity.
Please.
So I'm going to pull up my phone because this is on our text thread. Listeners, viewers, you get to peek behind the curtain.
Yes.
Okay. All right, guys. What is the most abused and misappropriated phrase, in your opinion? Is it A, do your own research, B, fake news, C, blank lives matter, D, woke? Christian, I'll go to you first.
This one was hard for me because, like Liam and I were saying before, they're all misused and abused like every moment of every day. So I kind of had to do SAT style process of elimination. And I would say do your own research gets under my skin the most because just on a personal level, right? It's like saying that you pulled up your phone and you typed in one word or one line into Google and therefore you're a researcher now. Like that one drives me nuts, right? That somehow you Googling something just completely throws out any of the research from the National Institutes of Health or whomever else. Like, oh, well, I Googled it. Which Google isn't even the same thing anymore, right? Now it's all this Gemini AI amalgamated search results and advertisements, right? It's not research. But I had to actually decide that it was fake news because the phenomenon of fake news, when it was first talked about 8-9 years ago, that was a real alarm bell. And what Trump did with that by just turning those words against themselves was obliterate the idea of facts and truth in our political discourse in such an obvious and brutish Orwellian way. And we've never really recovered from that. And now whenever there's any attempt at a good faith conversation or a fact check or anything else, it can just be cut off at the knees right there by saying, you know what, I'm not even going to enter into the conversation. That's fake news. As in, someone can bring up an assertion or a claim or even have a recording of Trump or Vance or whomever else saying something ridiculous. And rather than the burden shifting in that debate, that conversation to Trump and the MAGAverse, and them having to provide counter evidence, it can now simply be, oh, fake news never happened. It's Orwellian, it's insane. And it was a tough call, but out of the four, I had to go with fake news.
Christian, I know that you have the flu, but you were on Michael Jordan status tonight with your flu game commentary. I mean, you are otherworldly right now. I mean, you need to have the flu every time we do the pod.
If you only knew how close I came to canceling and going to bed instead. I'm glad it's working out.
Even increased poise and calm in your delivery.
Well, usually if it's a regular day, I'm pounding abusive amounts of caffeine from early in the morning until a few hours ago. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe I'm more centered because I cannot be so high keyed all day long.
Yeah, I don't want to go after you now because I ramble so easily. So now it's more obvious.
Yeah, well, Aleem, again, as John likes to bring up when he's busting my chops on this pod, part of that is that I do that as my job. So you shouldn't feel any kind of way that I know.
No, that's not what I say. That's not what I say.
Oh, what do you say?
That's your job in French. Hey, folks. He only does these interviews in French. We
Not
get the
true.
exclusive English pod
Not true.
with Christian. No, I'm just playing. Christian, those are just brilliant and insightful answers. Aleem, same to you.
Yeah,
Do your own research. Fake news, Black Lives Matter, woke.
I had the same struggle as Christian did, and I actually wound up on fake news as well for the exact same reason. So I'll take one of the other options just because. I cringe every time I hear somebody saying woke and railing against woke because it's misappropriation at its finest. But if I'll add something about the misappropriation of fake news, to Christian's point, when that discussion was begun a decade ago or so, it was a real thing that was of great concern to people. But when Donald Trump just co-opted the term and started using it completely wrong just to defend himself, people forgot that what it really meant and that it was still going on at that time, and into his election, and it was actually fake news that was propping him up. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. But woke, it's near and dear to me because as we've been hearing the term woke since the time we were babies, really, because that's something that Black folks have always said when other folks in the community say, oh, that person, they know what's up, they know what's going on politically or socially or whatever, so they're woke, and it was a term of endearment, within our communities, and we would often use it outside of our community as well if we, a person who was not Black who shared similar wokeness. We say, oh yeah, they're woke, or they're woke white folk, whatever. We would say these type of things, but now it's like we're throwing it around, like so I never like, when people take terms that I have a special place in my heart for, they use them just sort of randomly. So that's another one of those situations. So I'll leave it at that. But
well, I as I was listening to something this morning and I came up with these four, my initial reaction was do your own research. Christian, I 100% agree with you. What research are you doing? I mean, like you are at the absolute best. You're reading the research
of somebody else.
Someone did.
Right.
Like you are consuming information. You aren't doing your research. There isn't any research.
Yeah, right.
Like you, at best, read the articles that other researchers wrote.
Yeah.
But Christian, I have to say, on the fly, I'm going to agree with you. It has to be fake news.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. We have not recovered from that. Like that was this massive swipe at our perception of reality. When someone could knowingly say it was fake news and a little bit further down the road, it was alternative facts. Right? Like those were the two commonalities. And to bring this all the way back to something that we were talking about earlier, the effect, when we were talking about the effects of racist speech, the effects of fake news, I still drive by Comet Pizza, once or twice a week.
Yeah,
it wasn't that long ago that a guy showed up with an AR-15 to free all of the children that were supposed to be in the basement of Comet Pizza on Connecticut Avenue.
There's no basement. Yep.
Right? And then what does he do when he gets there? Like he's just shocked and disappointed. But this is the effect. So, gentlemen, I think we'll end it there. It's always great to spend this time together. For all of our listeners, if you haven't done so already, our listeners and viewers, please like, subscribe, give us feedback, give us comments. We want to hear it. We want to do better. And we just want to know if you're enjoying what we do. So we're Good Guys Getting Better. I'm John Borden.
I'm Aleem Boatwright.
I'm Christian Hanley.
Christian, feel better, brother.
I'm going to bed.
Go to bed right now.
I'm going to bed.
I can't wait to listen to this because the bars were on full effect.
Well, when I'm fully lucid, I'll go back and make sure I listen.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.